welcome to the very first episode of Rating the Ratings. This is going to be a show that I'm going to do roughly 24 hours after each game, when I'm going to have a look at one of the outlets, whether it's one of the newspapers or Sky Sports or one of the other TV channels, and actually give my opinion on the ratings that they've given to each player, whether I agree, which ones I agree with, which ones I don't agree with, whether people should be marked up or marked down. I wish I would have had an outlet like this many years ago, but before YouTube even existed. I remember a derby game at Old Trafford in which Phil Neville played at right back, and the Manchester Evening News, whoever was writing for the Evening News in those days, gave it, it's a long time ago, you can see how much it riled me, and they gave Phil Neville 4 out of 10, if I remember. It might have been a 5, but I think they gave him 4 out of 10. If I remember rightly. And not only did they give him 4 out of 10, but they actually made a note in the notes, like they always put a little note with it, don't they? They don't just give a mark usually. And the note was that his passing let him down. And I thought to myself, that's not how I saw that game. And I had the game recorded, so I thought, I'll watch it again. And I watched it again. And having watched it again, I couldn't believe what I saw. And I watched it yet again. And Phil Neville was absolutely fantastic. He had a superb game, and more so than that, his passing could be held up. You could have held up his game that day and said to one of the young lads in the youth team, if you want to become a successful right back and you can play like this, you've got a great chance of going further in the game. Phil Neville was zipping balls into the striker's feet. He was chipping balls into the body. He was giving easy passes into midfield. He dinked a couple of balls over their full back for our winger to get onto with no pace on, so they didn't carry away from him. His passing was absolutely superb. Now, I don't mind people, getting things a little bit wrong, but for me that day, Phil Neville deserved an 8 out of 10, was absolutely superb. The Manchester Evening News gave him 4 out of 10 and said his passing let him down, when his passing was possibly as good as anybody's, if not possibly even the best on the park. He was superb. That really riled me, as you can tell all these years later. A similar thing happened, a game that I watched. England were playing away somewhere in the Eastern Europe. Can't remember exactly where, but Michael Carrick was playing in midfield, and I even remember the writer, it was a Daily Mail, it was Martin Samuel, and in his marks, he marked Carrick really low. I can't remember what he gave him, and said that his passing let him down. Now, I know that you can have a bad game, you can have a bad day, anybody can have a bad day at the office, but Michael Carrick built a career on his passing. Michael Carrick's passing was as good. It was possibly, he was probably the best passer of a ball in the Premier League. He built his career on that. He won 5 league titles, won 1 European Cup, played in 3 European Cup finals, and won other, obviously other cups as well. And his passing was absolutely superb. And on that given evening, again, I recorded the game, I watched it back, and Michael Carrick's passing was comfortably the best in the England team. Why would a journalist who's probably getting read by tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and he's shaping their opinions, say something about a player that was just completely unfounded? What would you do that for? Michael Carrick was superb that day. His passing was just different class, and he said his passing let him down. It was beyond me. So maybe that's, going back all those years, that might be something that's made me decide that I want to actually do this show, where I'm going to look at what people have said. Each time I do it, I'll try and use a different outlet, if you like. I'm going to use a good place to start, since it was a Manchester Evening News that downgraded Phil Neville all those years ago. I'm going to start with the Manchester Evening News today. I'm going to look at their ratings for the United players, each player in the game against Arsenal. The first one is David De Gea, which they have given him a 5. So they give David De Gea 5 out of 10. Is there any reason to give him 5 out of 10? I thought perhaps not. It's not his fault that Pogba gave a silly penalty away. They actually mentioned that, again, he didn't save a pen. There's some stat out there that he hardly ever, if ever, saves a penalty. It would be nice if your keeper can save a penalty every now and then. Of course it would. But on any given day, if you are facing a penalty, to expect somebody to save a penalty or to down mark somebody because he didn't save a penalty is out of order. It's okay after you've not saved a penalty in 30 perhaps to say, well, you should have saved at least one in 30, but any given one taken individually, you shouldn't down mark somebody because he didn't save a penalty. And but for, you know, we'll never know now, but for Pogba tripping up Bellerin in the box, he might have kept a clean sheet, and the Evening News might have given him 8 out of 10 if he'd have kept a clean sheet. They also mentioned that he was relying on his defenders clearing a few balls. That's harsh. Obviously, you defend what your defenders there for. Your defenders have got to do their jobs as well. So I do think 5 out of 10 for De Gea on a day where the only ball that beat him was a penalty kick. I've marked him up to a 7 out of 10 for David De Gea. Wan-Bissaka, they've given a 4 out of 10. Mentioning the far post problems they had, they even mentioned that Saka beat him in the air. You are going to get beat in the air once or twice in a game, unless you're 6'4" like Harry Maguire. I think again, maybe a little bit harsh. He wasn't fantastic, Wan-Bissaka. He did okay. Again, like the keeper, you know, it's worth noting that but for the one penalty, you know, they've had a couple of good chances, Arsenal, lots of good chances. And I don't think the defenders really deserve to be down marked for letting one goal in, which happened to be a penalty, which wasn't given away even by one of the defenders. I don't think Wan-Bissaka was that bad. He did have a couple of problems at the far post. Saka beat him in the air. He also got caught under the ball, I would say twice. I remember one distinctly that dropped out at Aubameyang's feet, and Aubameyang fed it back in and Lindelof cleared it. But I'm just going to give Wan-Bissaka a 5, which the Evening News have given him a 4. And we'll then go to centre-backs, Victor Lindelof. They've mentioned that he lost the ball in the left-back area when they moved into the box, and I think it was, I can't remember who it was, but one of the Arsenal players hit the crossbar from the corner of the box. I think Lindelof did okay. Again, like I've just said, they didn't have lots of chances, Arsenal, and don't forget, they had a lot of the ball and a lot of pressure on United's back four. You know, if the defenders were that bad, Arsenal dominated the game so much, I don't think they'd have been relying on one penalty in whatever it was, nearly the 70th minute by the time they scored. But they've given Lindelof a 6. I've marked Wan-Bissaka up to a 5, and I would say that probably he did play a touch better than Wan-Bissaka. So I've agreed with that, Lindelof a 6. They've given Harry Maguire a 5. They've mentioned that he missed a chance with an header. It was a reasonable chance. I don't think you should be down marking a centre-back for missing a chance, though. He won the ball okay in their box. I'm not sure he even went for goal. Perhaps he should have gone for goal, but he headed it back across the box, I think hoping for somebody to rush in and knock it in at the post. He headed it back where it came from. I don't think you should down mark him for that. Again, like I've just said, all the defenders, not too bad, only conceded the one goal as a penalty and only a couple of other chances. So they give Maguire a 5. I don't think he played. There was much to choose between Lindelof and Maguire. They both just played okay. So Harry Maguire gets a 6 in my book, just like Lindelof. Luke Shaw, they've given him a 6. I thought Luke Shaw was the pick of United's defenders. I've watched the game back twice. He was, as I've just said that Wan-Bissaka got caught under the ball a couple of times. At least 3 times Luke Shaw headed the ball away. His timing and his positional sense in the penalty area was absolutely superb. He got to the edge of the 6-yard box and headed two or three balls away. One that was going right onto Willian's head at the far post, and Luke Shaw was there and headed it away clear. I think Luke Shaw had a good game. He's one of the few players, when you consider how much Arsenal dominated the game, he's probably the only player, to be fair. He was my man of the match, Luke Shaw, and I think Luke Shaw deserves a little bit better than a 6. They give him a 6. I'm going to give Luke Shaw a 7. They've actually noted that he was largely penned in, was the phrase in the Evening News. Largely penned in, suggesting that he didn't get forward enough. But, you know, it's not one player's fault that Arsenal are dominating the ball and dominating the game. So his job really is to defend, try and keep a clean sheet. Something that was mentioned on Sky, I mentioned this on my show, that went out this morning, where they criticised him for not pushing on to Willian, and Willian passed it to Bellerin when Bellerin won the penalty. I don't level any criticism at Luke Shaw for that. You can't get too tight to your winger. If you get too tight to your winger, he can skin you and you look an idiot, and they get into a dangerous position. You get close enough that if they try and go past you, you can match them step for step. That's what you do. He looked over his shoulder. He saw that Pogba had Bellerin. When a player's got the ball, if you look at how the player gets the ball, when Willian's on the wing, the whole back four close up when they're passing the ball around. They're passing the ball around in our third, or our half at least. So the back four come in a little bit tighter. The full backs come in a bit tighter. And as they move the ball across the pitch, they move up across on block. And as they move the ball back across the pitch, they all move across on block. But if this is your left back, and look, can see where my hand is on the screen. If that's your left back, he can't go all the way around here, because if he goes across here, if he goes all the way across to Willian, there's too big a gap between him and Maguire. That's the reason that they stay together and they move across together. They move across the park like that. They leave small gaps. They can't possibly allow somebody to pass through or even run through the middle of the field towards the goal. So they can't immediately go out to the winger. They only go out to the winger when the ball goes to the winger. They don't go and mark the winger while the ball's in the middle of the field. They can't do that. It leaves too much of a gap. So when the ball goes out to Willian, it's Shaw's job to go out to him, but to prevent him to getting a free run into the box or to the dead ball line. Because your starting position is at least 10 yards from that player, you're never going to be able to get to that player in time to stop him from passing it. You've got to get close enough to him that he can't get past you, can't take you on, but you cannot prevent him from passing it. So the criticism of Luke Shaw on allowing Willian to pass that ball, to me, was bang out of order. And as I say, in the evening news I've added that it was largely pending. We were defending most of the game anyway, so what would you expect? So Luke Shaw, for me, was United's man of the match, and I've given him 7 out of 10. Moving to the midfield. Scott McTominay, they've mentioned that he was a poor conduit for the ball to travel through into the forward's feet. They said that he was positioned at the base of the diamond, and in other words, it was his job to receive the ball. So they made a little mistake there. When the game kicked off and for the whole of the first half, it was Fred that was positioned at the base of the diamond. And although it's up to them, they've both got to get involved, of course they have. But if you imagine Matic, when Matic is playing at the base of a diamond, Matic will drop in, he'll make the centre-back split, he'll drop into that space, he'll get the ball, and he'll start the ball rolling, if you like. So it is mainly the job of, if you're playing with two central midfield players, one of them will be the one. Matic will take control of that situation. Fred can't take control of that situation in the same manner that Matic can. But if you're playing at the base of a diamond, you're a bit deeper than everybody else. So it's definitely your job to try and start the ball rolling more than it is the other. So for them to say he was positioned at the base and then say he was a poor conduit for getting the ball from back to front, that a little, in a roundabout way, they're sort of criticising him for not doing something that really Fred should have been doing. So I'm not sure that their mark of Scott McTominay of a 5 is fair. I think Scott McTominay was worth a little bit more than that. He didn't give the ball away as much as the other players in midfield. Pogba gave it away terribly at times. Bruno gave it away terribly at times. In the first half, I did a little thing last night where I watched it carefully. Scott McTominay, he tried to cross it once that was too low and it got cleared easily by a player, but that's a cross, it's not a pass. His passing, in the first half, he didn't give it away at all. In the second half, he gave it away a couple of times, but United were pressing and they were taking a few more risks. I mean, obviously, we've got players who take risks throughout the game. We don't need to, we've already got to, with Pogba and Bruno taking risks, we've got too many players taking risks already. So don't criticise McTominay for not taking risks. We need players who are going to keep the ball. So McTominay kept the ball with the red shirts. He didn't give it away, not a single solitary time in the first half. As the pressure came on us and we were trying to build stuff, he did take a couple more risks in the second half, and he did play a couple of passes that got intercepted in the second half. But for me, off the front six, the midfield and the forwards, Scott McTominay was the pick of the six. Not a lot of competition for him, to be fair. Everybody else was pretty poor. A lot of people might look at this and go, you know, I thought Scott McTominay was poor. If you think he was poor, he was the least poor. If I'm, you know, if I just say, okay, he didn't play great, he just played okay, he was the least poor of the front six. And the Evening News give him a 5. I'm giving him 6 out of 10. Scott McTominay. They've given Fred a 3. I think that's harsh. I don't think he was that bad. He did give the ball away a little bit sloppily in the first half a couple of times, and in the second half he got pushed off the ball a little bit too easily a couple of times. He obviously got taken off after an hour. I think he might have got taken off though because he was on a booking as well. That would have been playing on the manager's mind. There was a danger of him obviously getting a second yellow. He probably wanted Matic on to give us a bit more control, which I think Matic did when he came on. It was actually 0-0 when Fred went off, by the way. I know a lot of people say, yeah, Fred went off, we were drawing, we weren't losing. But I don't think any of the other players in the team could be apportioned any blame for Pogba tripping up a man, really. Well, I'll come to that in a minute. For what Pogba did, I don't think you could blame any other players. But Fred's 3, in the Evening News, they've actually... Look, his passing wasn't great. It wasn't great, but they've written in the Evening News that he couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat. Now, I think that's harsh. He wasn't great, but they give him a 3. A little bit too harsh. I'm giving him a 4. Paul Pogba. They've said he couldn't match Arsenal's intensity and his passing was errant, and they've also said that it was imbecilic, the penalty that he give away. A little bit difficult to disagree with that. He was dispossessed a hell of a lot of times. You sometimes see stats on Twitter and wonder if they're right or wrong. Somebody put a stat on Twitter saying I think it said he was dispossessed 8 times in the game. It's a hell of a lot of times to be dispossessed. Even though I've watched the game twice, I haven't got time to count everything, and I didn't count that. But you know, Pogba was pretty poor. I would have given him a 4 to match Fred. But maybe because maybe it is worth taking 1 point off him for giving away a silly penalty, which ended up being the only goal of the game. So the Evening News have given Paul Pogba a 3, and I'll probably stick with that. I'll settle for that. I agree with him. They've given Bruno a 4. Risky passing is an important part of his game, or a big part of his game, I think they said. But yesterday he did it to a maddening level. They also added, this is not an aberration. So I think the writer is actually saying that this is happening all too often now, that Bruno plays too many risky passes to a maddening level. In other words, he's just giving the ball away far too much. I do agree with that. One thing I would like to say though, and I'm not suggesting that he didn't give it away too much yesterday. To say it's not an aberration is to suggest that he's doing this every week. Even if he's doing this every week, that wouldn't necessarily mean that he did it yesterday. You shouldn't really take on board what people have been like in the last few weeks or the last however long when you're looking at a given game. Just look at that given game. Something I did notice that really wound me up, 30 seconds into the second half, he had a shot from 30 yards. Luckily, when I say luckily, the keeper would have just gobbled it up. But luckily, it hit a defender, took a deflection, and we actually got a corner out of it. But Mason Greenwood was free to his right, probably about 10 yards further forward and to his right. And Greenwood he did have a defender in front of him, but just one defender in front of him. I mean, Greenwood does something quite often that I don't like. He's forever... I think I can see that when the ball's coming to Mason Greenwood, he's thinking if he can get a shot in even before he gets the ball. And when he gets that ball, nearly every time, he takes a touch, he tries to come in field and he wants to hit it with his left foot. Some people think that's good. It's not good. Don't be trying. You shouldn't be thinking that you're going to get a shot in. You should be just playing the game naturally. Receive the ball, pass it, move. receive the ball again, pass it, move. Every now and again, situation will arise where it's the right thing to have a shot. If you're trying to work an angle to have a shot in the Premier League, it's really difficult. He's done it a couple of times and he's scored a couple of times from situations like that. But most of his goals come from situations, if you think of the pass from Marshall at Aston Villa to him, where, you know, all he's got to do is take a touch and hit it. The pass from Bruno at Old Trafford against Bournemouth, he's just got to take a touch and hit it. Most often your goals come in a situation where it's clearly obvious that the shot's on. It's not often that you score a goal when the shot's not on and you're thinking about having a shot when it comes to you, or even before it comes to you, and you've got to try and work that opening. That's a really difficult thing to do. Keep passing the ball, wait for a proper chance to show, and then have a dig. But what I will say, I mean, I've obviously gone on about Greenwood there, but the reason I'm mentioning that is on this situation, Greenwood sometimes tries to get a shot in when there's 2 or 3, even more players than that, blocking his way to goal, which is a bit stupid if I'm honest. Yesterday, if Pogba would have passed him that ball, there was only one defender between him and the goal. In that particular situation, coming in from the right as well on his strong left foot, it might have just been a good chance that for Greenwood, and it might have been worth him trying to shift the ball and having a dig, or beating his man, having a dig, and Greenwood threw his hands up. He more or less had a tantrum. He threw his hands up in the air. You can see it quite easily. 30 seconds into the second half, Bruno has got to make better decisions than that. If you look at the shades of grass, those shades of grass are 6 yards wide, and he was 2 shades of grass outside the penalty area, Bruno, when he shot. It's far too far out to be shooting, and I'm not surprised Greenwood threw his hands up in the air, a bit annoyed with him. But yeah, Bruno, the Evening News will give him a 4 out of 10, and I'll stick with that, that's fine. Into the forward line, Mason Greenwood, they've also given him a 4, looked unsure and his positioning wasn't good. They've said, I don't know what they mean by his positioning wasn't good. He was playing as a split striker in the first half. I think they more or less went into 4-4-2, some called it 4-2-3-1. But the idea was that there was 2 holding midfield players. There was supposed to be 3 in front, but the two wingers, if you like, in that 3, they've got to track back. You don't just leave your 2 midfield players defending. As far as I'm concerned, it's 4-4-2. So in the second half, Greenwood was playing wide right, Pogba was playing wide left, and to start with, McTominay and Fred were in the middle. So whether he was unsure of his positioning, I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that, to be dead honest. But he did struggle to get in the game, Mason. It doesn't help when you've got a player taking a shot. You've got to get things right. You just never know. If you get things right, if Bruno wouldn't have took that shot on and passed it to Mason, Mason might have just shifted it a bit, smashed it with his left foot, might have gone. You never know now, obviously. But you've got to try and get the simple things right. And it could have been a great day for Mason Greenwood if Bruno would have passed him that ball. So, you know, it didn't happen for him. And if he's not scoring goals, Mason, he doesn't get in the game a lot. So I'll stick with the Evening News' rating of 4 out of 10. Rashford, they've given a 5 to. They've said he was on the fringes too much. I think he was a little bit better than Mason Greenwood. I'm not sure he was worth a 5. I think we had Wan-Bissaka on a 5. Or was it? I think, no, they gave him a 5. But I don't think Rashford deserves much more than Mason, really. So I don't know if we're doing halves. I suppose it's up to me. I'll go 4.5 with Rashi. Yeah, he was on the fringes too much. He got bullied a little bit. Roy Keane mentioned his body language. I don't really like talking about body language. I'm being a little bit hypocritical because one of my favourite players, Anthony Marshall, gets criticised for his body language quite a lot. The difference here, though, I've got to point this difference out. Marshall, a lot of people seem to think he has a sullen face, a sullen look about him. It's one thing about body language, but looking at someone's face and saying that's body language, I'm not having that. That's a load of rubbish. But Marcus Rashford yesterday, he was lying on the floor quite often after he'd been tackled and getting up pretty slowly, looked a little bit lethargic. That's what I call body language. So I think Keano might have had a point. His body language wasn't great. But like I say, I don't really like people talking about body language, because I know that Anthony Martial's body language, as far as I'm concerned, is perfectly fine. But a lot of people have a go at him about it. One thing I've spotted about Marcus, by the way, I've only really seen it this season. Some people might want to say to me that he was doing it before, but he seems to have this tendency now, when he gets stood with the ball, that he puts his foot on top of the ball and drags it back and forward 2 or 3 times before he passes it. I've got to be honest, I don't see the point of it, and it's driving me a little bit round the bend. He just stands still but rolls his foot over the ball 2 or 3 times before he passes it, and I don't see the point of it, and I wish he'd stop it. But yeah, Marcus, 4.5 for me, just slightly better than Mason. I don't particularly like marking the substitutes. The substitutes are, obviously they might get 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, but when lots of players have played for 90 minutes, and to compare your efforts over, it's okay coming on and making a difference, which can happen, but sometimes the opposition are tired, and it's the players who have worked the socks off in the first hour or the first 70 minutes that have made it difficult for them and made them tired, and then you're coming on and reaping the rewards from that. So I don't particularly like marking the subs. I will say in the evening news, though, that they gave Matic a 5, they gave Van der Beek a 5, slightly above average for their scores yesterday. So I think they were, that's fair enough, but I'm not particularly keen on marking substitutes. What I did, I looked at, a lot of people were on to me about McTominay, and I mentioned it yesterday. Scott McTominay, for me, as I've said, was the least poor of all the midfield players. So don't get on your high horse. I'm not saying he was great. I'm not saying he was particularly good. He just wasn't as bad as everybody else. And I've just mentioned all the results from the Manchester, or the scores that they've given them from the Manchester Evening News, and just to look, these people in the newspapers, they've got no more idea than the average fan, in my opinion, but they are getting paid for doing this job. So what I've done is I've had just a quick look at how McTominay was rated in 4 different outlets. The reason I've done that is just to get an idea of what other outlets are seeing him as. So, for example, in the Manchester Evening News that we just looked at, McTominay was rated as the pick of the midfield players. Again, don't get carried away. I'm not saying he was great. I'm just saying he wasn't as bad as everybody else, and the Evening News appears to agree with me. And just because I haven't looked at some results and not included them, by the way, I just thought of 4 different outlets. I've Googled them and I've had a look at what they've thought. The BBC, they've given really, you could take this with a pinch of salt, because they've given Marcus Rashford man of the match on the BBC. So whoever's given that mark, really, you shouldn't even take any notice of him, I don't think. But they've got of the midfield players that started, you see, they've got Bruno rated as the pick of the 4, with McTominay 2nd, Fred 3rd, and Pogba 4th. I think the person who's written this, obviously, if you think about what's in the news at the minute, Marcus Rashford, they've got man of the match. I think there's different reasons other than football reasons that they've got him man of the match. And then also Bruno, I think, we've had a Bruno honeymoon, and I think they're still on honeymoon with the Bruno thing, rating him as the pick of the 4 midfield players yesterday. So, but McTominay was rated 1st in the Evening News. He was rated 2nd on the BBC. I've looked at the Daily Mirror. In the Daily Mirror, Fred, Bruno, McTominay and Pogba all rated 5 out of 5. So they don't think there was any difference between any of them. And on Sky, they've given McTominay 5, and they've given Pogba, Bruno, Fred all a 4. So McTominay is 1st in 2 places, dead even with everybody else in 1 place, and 2nd in the other place. So on average there, it's looking like most of the outlets on average agree with me that McTominay was the least poor of all our midfield players. So that's me rating the ratings. I've just rated the ratings of the Manchester Evening News, whoever it is who's writing for the Evening News today. See, I don't know if you all agree with me. I'm going to put a thing on Twitter. The ones, in fact, let's have a little think about it. The ones where people might think, why have you only given that, or why have you given him so many? Maybe Luke Shaw, obviously McTominay, McTominay, maybe Fred, and probably Bruno. So Shaw, McTominay, Fred, and Bruno. I've just read out the scores just to have a quick recap. Bruno, I've given a 4-2. Fred, I've given a 4-2. Scott's got a 6 and Shaw's got a 7. On Twitter, I'm going to do a poll. If people want to vote on Twitter and let me know which one they want me to do a player focus on. Tomorrow, I'll do a player focus on whichever one comes out on top in that poll on Twitter. And then I'll put a few clips up on Twitter showing the things that I'm talking about. So there'll be a vote on Twitter tonight. That'll finish around this time tomorrow. I'll put it on for 24 hours, and then tomorrow evening, whoever has come out on top in that poll, I'll put a few clips on Twitter and explanations again on a YouTube video on football philosophy with Rick the Red UK. If you enjoyed this show, tell all your friends. If you didn't, keep stum.